Hey there, everyone. My name is Ram Dominguez, and I am hosting this 34th edition of the Hasura Community Call for May. We're very excited to have all of you here today, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into our agenda so we can see what we're going to be talking about. You can see we have a packed schedule, as we normally do. We're going to start off by talking about V3 updates with Rahul, and then we'll jump into some exciting work in native queries and logical models with Samir. Then we'll start talking about stored procedures as well. So for all those SQL Server folks out there, there's going to be some great things for you today. Additionally, we're going to talk about some improvements around caching and then improved observability on event triggers and subscriptions. And then finally, we'll look at some of the work from our technical evangelist on some exciting things regarding AI and regarding starter kits with Hasura. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into our first segment, which is going to be on V3. So let me bring Rahul up on the stage. Rahul, how are you?
Doing great, Rob, and hi, everyone. So the first update we have is around declarative metadata authoring. A big part of Hasura V3 is that you will be able to author uh, metadata in the new GDS format and apply it to projects and iterate fast. So on that regards, we have update for you. I'll show you a POC of a JSON-based metadata validation and autocomplete tool. And going forward, we will build up on this POC. We'll provide a new metadata structure, and you will see updates to the GraphQL data specification in the weeks and months to come. And after that new metadata structure, we'll provide YAML-based metadata, support for popular code editors for metadata validation and autocomplete, and ending with SDKs for main programming languages so that you have the entire toolkit to author metadata in whichever format or programming language of your choice. So let's see how metadata validation and autocomplete POC for JSON looks like. So when we use the new CLI for Hasura V3 and create a local project, it gives you a blank JSON file to author metadata. In this POC, we will show autocomplete and validation as you author metadata. So here we started with a blank file, and I'm using VS Code as a text editor of my choice. And as you can see, as it's giving you information on which fields the metadata would accept, and then with subfields within each object of the metadata. And if you are not able to enter something, it's very similar to the Docker Compose authoring experience which you are used to with now Hasura metadata. So as you can see, it helps us complete different objects within the metadata and lets you know what is expected. For example, in metadata, it mentions that it's expecting databases and models. So you can use this autocomplete to start filling your metadata. And as I mentioned, this is the first proof of concept for JSON-based files. We'll be coming up with YAML-based files and eventually SDK in a programming language of your choice. So more ahead on declarative meta authoring in weeks and months to come. With that, I want to provide you the next update, which is around a new offering by Hasura called Hasura Secure Connect. And what it lets you do is create secure tunnels to easily connect Hasura Cloud with any local resources. Now with Hasura V3, as I showed you in the last community call demo, multi-region deployment is out of the box, and deploying to production is very easy. The moment you author your metadata, you can start serving your API to users anywhere in the world. So being on Hasura Cloud has just a lot of advantage when it comes to working with APIs. But what about all your local resources, especially your local database, when it comes to that early iteration phase, when you're just prototyping or you just want to share with your team members before even hooking it up with a cloud database or going to consumers at a large scale? So what Hasura Secure Connect lets you do is work with your local resources, such as a local database, and the CLI itself will be able to manage that connection with the local database and create a secure tunnel with Hasura Cloud, so that you could seamlessly work with your local resources while being on Hasura Cloud and enjoying all those capabilities which we will offer, such as out of the box multi-region deployment. So I want to show you a brief overview of what Hasura Secure Connect looks like. So what you see here is using Hasura V2 as a database management tool. And this is the local Postgres database, as you can see, listening on port 5432. And what we have done is we have loaded a Chinook dataset here because the GDS file we will use will be Chinook dataset based. So we have a Postgres database listening on 5432. Next, we will go to the V3 CLI, and let's look at the new tunnel commands which we have launched by this community call. And the new tunnel commands let you list, create new tunnels, activate a pause tunnel, remove a tunnel, and list all the tunnels you have for a particular project. So for this demo purposes, we have created some tunnel behind the scene, and we'll just list those tunnels in front of you. So as you can see, we have a tunnel which is listening to localhost 5432, and this is the endpoint which you have, the tunnel endpoint, which is analogous to that 5432 port in your local machine. And we say that this tunnel is active status. So now this is the GDS metadata file, which we showed you last community call as well. And in the database URL field, you can see that we have pasted the tunnel domain, which is Hasura Secure Connect domain, but it is actually leveraging the 5432 local port. So now you are using the Secure Connect or tunnel domain in your metadata file and serving API request using Hasura Cloud and your local database. So this is the new Hasura V3 console, and for that build, we are trying to run a query against your local database. And with this try, the query will go through. And once we see the traces behind the scene, you will see that this query has actually triggered that. If you see the select Postgres trace, it is calling the tunnel domain, which I'm highlighting there. So you can see Hasura Secure Connect or tunnels in action. With that, I want to, the last update here is that we have provided a lot of enhancements on the console geared towards fast iteration. So I'll go through. You see different a new way to see the builds and more information on the builds, what time that build was created, and more info. And we'll add more information such as custom text to describe each build. And we also have a new functionality on the CLI for managing secrets easily. New CLI capabilities for secret management, as you can see, new commands for that. And going forward, there will be increased flexibility in templating metadata. Right now, we allow only 6 or 7 fields in the metadata to be templatized or used as secrets or variables. Our vision with V3 is that almost everything in the metadata file can be templatized or used as a variable. And using the new CLI developer experience, it would be just easy for you to manage that list of secrets and variables that you will eventually template in your metadata. So with that, let's have a look at the secret commands on the CLI. So as you can see, we can see the list of secrets. We can set secrets, and uh, we can delete secrets on the CLI right now. And let me bring up a list of secrets for a project before. Uh, So I created some secrets for a project before. So I've already set secrets for a project. So as you can see, for local database URL, yes, it's very safe to show all these passwords. So we'll change them after this call. But as you can see, key value pairs of cloud database URL and local database URL, which you would reference in your metadata JSON files. So if I look at the metadata JSON file, this is the how the the database URL will be referenced in the GDS file. This is what you've been used to looking at in this demo and the previous demo. With now the secret functionality out there, we can hide all of this sensitive information with in this manner. So these key value pairs can now be referenced in the metadata in this way. So as you can see, connection strings, value from secret. This is the cloud database URL which we are referencing behind the scene. And let's do a fast iteration of how to apply these builds onto the project and test them on the console. So with that, let me go back to the console. And as I mentioned, we have made updates to the console since the last community call. Um, Now you can have see a list of all projects uh, on the console itself, and then within each project you can see the different builds which are there for each project. So let's say this project has these many builds, and if I create a build for a project right now, it would give you information such as I just created a build for a project, and let me go back to the console. So as you can see, that build has appeared here, and this is the build I just created on the fly right now, and I can apply that build to this project and then start iterating. Also, I want to just show that using this value secret, we are able to run a successful query. So let me go back to the console and run a query for that particular metadata file. So, and the last thing which we want to showcase here is that you could toggle between these builds, and each build has a different URL. So let me select. So each build has a different URL which you can test on the console itself. So I can test this build for this project. I can then select a different build here and execute that query. And when I'm satisfied with which build I want to give to my consumers, I can then apply using the console and then start serving that metadata to my customers. So if I select project, this will give me the project URL and the way to test that project GraphQL endpoint. Lastly, we have the modeled editor here, which you can consume and look at the GDS-based metadata. So with that, these are the updates from my side on Hasura V3. Please let me know if any questions, or message on GitHub, or reach out to me on email if any ideas or questions here. But thank you for your attention, please.
Rahul, that was awesome, and I think we're all very excited. That was my first time seeing a few of those console updates, so it's really cool to see what we're going to be able to do inside of the console. I do have to point out, right, we're not going to have a community call next month. We have something going on next month that's not a community call that we'll hopefully get some more V3 updates at, and that is HasuraCon. And I'm told that there's a button down below the call right now that you can actually register for HasuraCon right there. So Rahul, hopefully we'll hear from you at HasuraCon with a little bit more about V3 and where things are going.
For sure.
Samir, who's going to talk about a few things for us, beginning with the concept called native queries and logical models, something that I'm sure people are very excited about. Samir, how are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm going to unshare my screen in just a moment, but can you give us a little TLDR about why people may be really excited about these two features in particular?
Yeah. So I think this slide and the next slide kind of go hand in hand. Native queries is something people have been asking for a long time, and the point is that often, Hasura generates SQL for you. We love that. I love that particularly. But sometimes you need to write your own thing. So native queries are kind of an escape hatch. They allow you to just write the SQL that you know you need so that you can get on with your day. This might be because the feature you're looking for doesn't exist yet, or it might be because you want to be very nuanced about the kinds of permissions you're giving your client applications access to. Whatever the reason, I'm sure you could find a good use case. So I'd love to just demonstrate how these things work. And we're also going to demonstrate what's on the next slide, which is SQLServer stored procedures, just little T's. I'll do them at once. We have one database. It's the Microsoft SQL Server database. Native queries also work with Postgres and BigQuery currently, with more to come. So let's write some SQL. So I'm just going to create some fake data, the way all good presentations start. Let's create some data. This creates an article table. It has an ID, a title, a date, some content, and then some data. You can see that we have a few items in the last few months and then a couple items that are in the future. That's relevant for later. And we're going to create this article table. Lovely. If you're not familiar with MS SQL, just pretend it's Postgres. It's pretty much like with a few names changed. Identity just means serial. Cool. And now we're going to jump into this new native queries tab. I'm going to hit create native query. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a native query specifically that generates an excerpt of the article, for example, because we want to generate a list of articles and we don't want to have the entire content. I'm going to run it here. And first of all, I'm going to add a logical model. The logical model is the return type of the SQL that I'm about to write. I'm going to call it article excerpt. I really should have picked easier names to type for a demo. This is the structure of the data we're about to return. So I'm going to create some SQL, and it's going to return an ID. It's an integer. It's not null. Title, text, not null. An excerpt, which is text and nullable, and the dates, which I'm going to return as text. And then we're going to create the logical model. This is, like I said, the structure of the data. That is a direct representation of a GraphQL type. I'm going to select that. And now I'm just going to paste some SQL because you don't want to see me try to write SQL live. That's a bad idea. This is a query that generates the ID, the title, the date as before, and takes a substring of the content up to the max length, which is a parameter, which I'll explain in a moment. And then if in the case where the length was greater than the max length, it will append ... And I'm going to add a parameter, max length, which is an integer, and it's required. I hope this all makes sense so far. I'm going to hit save. Great. And now I'm going to jump to the API Explorer, and I'm going to run this query. Article with excerpt, args max length 50, and you can see that I've got the excerpt. It's from this exact SQL that I provided. And that is approximately the entirety of the feature. You can provide the SQL that it needs to run. This is very similar, of course, to writing your own function and tracking the function. It just allows you to do it without DDL. This is especially important, of course, in organizations where maybe the developers don't have access to the database directly, or you need some way of iterating more quickly, or you just don't want to. That's also okay. And of course, it comes with all the usual Hasura features, like being able to specify where ID is less than 4. There we go, and it gets the first 3 items. The usual stuff. I want to show you one more thing. And of course, please dump your questions in the chat. I will try and answer them in the chat later. But I can also add a stored procedure. This is a feature that we only currently support for Microsoft SQL Server, which is why I'm demoing Microsoft SQL Server today. That's a mouthful. I wish they named their product something a little shorter. Let's call it MS SQL. So MS SQL is very popular, of course, especially in enterprises, and it's quite common for people to use a lot of stored procedures, specifically with this database. So we added support for it. You can now track a stored procedure. It also uses logical models, so you can create a logical model. Oh, excuse me, I'm just going to refresh the page because I have a feeling. Yeah. And this time I want to return. Actually, let's talk about the procedure itself first. Go back to the SQL tab. Delete that. I'm going to create a procedure which is very simple. Like again, you could write this yourself, but maybe you want to provide the opportunity for your client developers to not have to think about things like where clauses. So I'm going to create a procedure called publish articles, which selects the ID, title, and content columns from article where the date is less than or equal to the current date. Hit run. Great. And now I can go to the stored procedures tab. We currently have this under native queries. This is very much a beta thing, and that might change. And create a logical model which represents the exact same thing. I'm going to call it published article, and we're going to have an ID, integer, a title, and content. Oh, come on, demo gods. Oh, of course, I need to create the source first. Publish article. We can provide arguments if the stored procedure takes an argument, but we don't have that right now. And then I hit track stored procedure. And now, just as before, I can query for published articles. I'll just get the ID and the title, and it should get me the first 3 articles, right? Because those are the ones with the date less than the 25th of May. It currently is. I just have to check that. So there you go. It's a simple feature. I'm sure you could have guessed how it worked without me explaining it, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to take a look. The only thing I haven't touched on, because we don't have UI for this yet, that's coming, is permissions. I'm currently running as an admin. You will need to add permissions, of course, for your other roles to be able to actually access these column and row permissions. And all the information is in the documentation. I think that's about it. Cool. I'm looking forward to reading through all your questions. I'll stop sharing my screen at this point. Have a lovely day.
That's exciting, Samir. Thanks so much for those demos. To your point about writing SQL in a live demo, maybe at our next offsite, we can have a competition between the two of us to see who can write the least efficient SQL, because they can give you a run for your money.
I tried to do Advent of code in SQL.
Yeah,
I ended up writing a lot of very, very inefficient SQL.
Likewise. Yep. All right. Thanks so much, Samir. Folks, up next, we're going to have Anand join us to talk about caching, and I'm going to go ahead and bring him on stage. And Yep. How are you?
Sorry for the trouble. I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. I feel like you and I have been going back and forth in a lot of PRs talking about improvements to caching and some things going in docs. So it's exciting to hear you.
Hey everyone, I'm Anand. I'm from the engineering team, and I'm here to talk about some of the improvements we've been doing around caching features, as Rob was mentioning. So first up, we have a big announcement. We are enabling caching on Hasura Cloud free, and we are also going to increase the limits on the professional plan. This is not live yet, but it will be rolled out over the next week. So I've put together a small table highlighting some of the differences. You can see like free was not enabled before, but now you have like a cache max size of 100 MB and a max TTL of 600 seconds. And the professional plan, it used to be 100 MB and 600 seconds, and we've bumped it up to 1 GB of max cache size and 60 minutes of max TTL. So this will help you, cache more things, cache a lot more data. Up next, we have some improvements to the docs around caching, as Rob was mentioning. We've got some feedback from our users that we didn't have a good documentation around caching. So now we have a page explaining how caching works. how Hasura caching works, what kind of queries can be cached, and also we've explained how the cache key is computed, and we have got loads of examples. You can see it in the how it works page in caching. So I have it right here. So this is already live. You can go check it out. These are the examples I was talking about. And moving on to the next one, we have enabled support for remote schemas and action queries where forward client header setting is set to true. So previously, Hasura would not cache the remote schemas and action queries with this setting. But now you can use your remote schema queries or your remote join queries or action queries with which forwards the client headers where the settings set to true, and those queries will be cached. This is already available on 2.26 beta, and it will be available on stable, I think, next week. So I have a demo for that as well. So I have this Hasura local instance running. I'm running 2.26 beta, and I have a remote schema. Just go ahead and zoom this a little bit. So I head over to the remote schema tab. I have this remote schema added. This is the canonical GraphQL server, the country strip of dates thing. It has this these queries, and I have the forward all client header setting set to true. Now if I come back to the API tab, and if I make this query, the country's query, you can see this is getting cached. And I'm on 2.26 beta. If you tried this on 2.25, this would not get cached, and this would throw a warning in the header. And now you can see this getting cached. So yeah, that's a big update. And next, we have added Prometheus metrics for cache hit miss rates. This is also available since 2.26 beta. So lots of caching updates on 2.26 beta. This will be available on Hasura Cloud soon, as soon as we release 2.26 on Hasura Cloud. We have added Hasura cache request count metric specifically. So this metric allows you to count how many requests has the @cache directive. And this also adds a label called status, which indicates if there's a hit or a miss. We have also put together this guide, which explains how you can use this metrics and integrate it with your Grafana dashboard. So I can give you a quick look at that as well. So this is under the caching section, you can see these new pages got added. And this is the caching metrics. It explains the metric. It explains like how you can efficiently use it. And this gives you like a screenshot of how you can visualize the metric. It also gives you a sample PromQL queries that you can add. And in fact, I have a Grafana dashboard going here. This is running on my local host. I have this Prometheus instance also running, which you can see scrapes this Hasura cache request count metrics. And if I get over to the API tab and I make a bunch of requests, so I've intentionally put the TTL to 1 to sort of simulate a bunch of cache misses. If I make requests in more than 1 second interval, there will be cache misses. So if I jump back to the Grafana dashboard, it takes a few seconds to sort of reflect this. You can see, so the green line here indicates total requests. The yellow line is the hits, and the blue line is the misses. So you can see the misses jump because we were simulating misses. The miss rate sort of jump up. If we go ahead and increase this TTL to a large value, and then we make a bunch more requests, and all of these will hit the cache. So probably a few seconds, you'll see the yellow line will jump up, and there will be a spike in cache hits. Yeah, there you go. And there's a sort of a gauge which indicates the hit miss ratio here. All right. So that's on the metric side. Next, we have a small UI enhancement on Hasura console. Now, if you run queries and they take longer to execute, it pops up with a bunch of suggestions to start caching your queries. This is also available since 2.26 beta. And that's all the updates from my end. Thank you for listening.
Janan, that's really exciting. Of course, caching is very important to all of us, right? Making sure that things are optimized and good for our applications and our users. So thanks so much for that. I appreciate it. See on the slide here that we have Tiru and Paratosh that I'm going to go ahead and pull on the stage real quick. We're going to be talking about some improvements that have been made for observability around event triggers and subscriptions. And just like I was saying to Anand a second ago, lots of PRs coming through from you folks over the past couple of weeks. And it's really exciting to see all these improvements that are happening.
We have done a lot of work on improving the observability for subscriptions and event trigger systems in Hasura. So these two systems are like fairly complicated because they have to maintain state in some form or the other. Rest of every feature in Hasura is pretty much stateless, but subscriptions, because you have to maintain a persistent connection, and event triggers, because that also has to like get events and deliver it to an external webhook. There is some state management involved. So monitoring these can be was very challenging, and to address that problem we have added a whole bunch of metrics for observability. And with this, what you can now do is something called golden signals monitoring, right? So this is like a gold standard for monitoring, and this was first formalized in the Google SRE book, but it's pretty much like very commonly used across the industry for monitoring distributed systems or any kind of system. So the four signals are latency, traffic, errors, and saturation, right? So these four signals are the main things that you would look for, that you would monitor, that in case of any errors or in case of any performance degradations, these are where you would start off with. You will look at all four, and then you will make your next action item, or you'll make a hypothesis about what happened, right? So now you can do this for subscriptions, and we have a lot of new metrics here. We'll go through the docs in a bit, but just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of kinds of metrics we have. For example, the first one under latency is subscriptions total time, right? This was historically present in the logs, but now you can also have it in your Prometheus metrics. In traffic, you can see Hasura active WebSockets, Hasura active subscriptions, and saturation, you can see like number of Postgres connections. Similarly, in event triggers as well, you can see relevant metrics for latency, traffic, error, and saturation. And with this, you can create like dashboards as per your needs, right? And we have few sample dashboards that we will add in the docs that you can also just simply copy paste. And with this, I just want to quickly show you how you can find this in the docs. So if you go to subscriptions, we have this new page on observability and performance. The first part here shows you like gives you a brief of like how the subscription subsystem actually functions, right, architecturally. That is important for you to understand the rest of the metrics. Then we have all the metrics described here with few examples. And finally, there is this golden signals methodology, which is also described. So you can just follow this section to like create a workflow or create like a run book for any kind of performance monitoring or debugging for your subscriptions. And finally, this section already existed, but this also gels well into this page, which is how do you tune subscription performance if you have noticed any issues from your previous analysis. Similarly, in event triggers, we have the same thing. You have observability and performance, and you get kind of a section on golden signals to do your analysis. With this, I will hand it over to Paritosh for a very quick and fun demo, and you'll see some of these metrics in actions.
Thanks, Thiru. Okay, so I will share my screen now. So what we are going to do is we are going to actually have a system, have a Hasura GraphQL system, and then we will try to run some load, and then we will try to figure out if there is something going wrong with our event trigger system, and then we will take help from docs to actually fix that. So I already have a Hasura running here. And I have already set up three tables, and I have set up three event triggers. So that event trigger one is actually on the test table one, and so on. Now I am going to use the GraphQL bench tool for running a simple load, and so this will actually start mutating the tables and like start inserting data so that the event triggers are fired. And then I have also set up the Grafana and Prometheus for this. Uh, so we should start getting some data. Yeah. So now we can see that the average event processing time is actually shooting up here, and it is taking a lot of time, like 6 seconds, 7 seconds, to deliver the event. So this means that the latency for this matrix is actually high. So let's go to the event triggers and the latency, the golden signal latency for this. Now we see that the event processing time is actually high, and now we can do a few things. We can investigate the database performance by looking at the fetch time per batch, right? So let's go and do that. So this is fetch time per batch, and it seems low enough, right? So this means our database is actually performing well, and the problem might be somewhere else. So let's try to investigate the HTTP worker saturation. So we need to check the value of event queue time, right? So let's do that, and you can see that the event queue time is actually shooting up, and it is around 9 seconds now. So this means that our events are actually getting queued, and that's why the event trigger is performing poorly. So, and also we have a possible solution here to increase the HTTP pool size. So we can try doing that. So first, let's stop the load, and we will also need to stop our server so that, yeah. And then we will start our server with a increased HTTP pool size. So previously it was 10, and now I'm increasing it to 100. And then we can start the load again. I'll just give it a second to start. Uh, okay, right. So the server has started. Now let's start the load, and we can. One sec, yeah. Okay, so now let's take a look at the matrix again. So there is some gap because our server was down for that much time, and we will soon have the new data with us. So now we can see that the event processing time is pretty low. It's around 1.46 seconds, and also the event queue time has actually reduced to milliseconds now. So this is how you can debug your system using the observability and performance tuning docs that we have. So that was all from my side. Thank you.
Just want to call out that like Hasura is probably the only product with real-time capabilities, which is also giving observability to this level of details, and hopefully that helps our users scale and tune their performance as they require. Over to you, Rob.
So exciting. Thanks to both of you. That was fun to see. That's my second time seeing that demo. Paritosh, I love it. It's great to see, all the traffic coming in and then just how things improve. Well done. Way to go. We have 2 demos left, I believe, and they're both going to be from our technical evangelism team that we have at Hasura. So in a second, I'm going to bring on Simrat and Ricken, and we're going to look at something that we're calling AutoSQL. So this idea of incorporating AI into I'm not going to give it away. I'm going to let them say it. So let me bring them on because I'm very excited about this and I don't want to steal their thunder.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
So, so what we're presenting here is it's a really cool feature, and it's going to be really helpful if you feel like your SQL skills have gone rusty like mine. So it's been some time since I tried out my querying and all of those things. So we thought, like, why not leverage the AI and build this AutoSQL for the Hasura console? And this is a very early demo to showcase exactly that. And for the demo, what we're going to be doing is we have like a very small toy setup where we have like company data. We have just 2 companies here and some dummy information. Then we have the sales information, and the sales information is associated with the company ID, and we have some sales record there. We also have some stocks data, which is basically the stock ticker prices for the different dates for these 2 companies. And let's just talk about this hypothetical scenario where my manager has actually asked me to query and figure out which of these 2 companies, or even if there were like more companies, just to basically dig down into the data and figure out which would be the company that we should be partnering with. And that's a lot of data analysis that we'll have to do. And imagine, like, if you're not very comfortable with SQL, if you have to do all of that, it's going to take you a lot of time. So let's go to our SQL workspace, and we have something really interesting for you there. Yeah, I definitely need help. So let's say that I want to now compare these 2 companies on their ticker prices. So let me just try out a query, something like generate a query to rank the stock ticker prices by, or rather we can actually even say to rank um, by their average prices. Let's be a little more creative and say average price, the average stock ticker price. Yeah. It's going to take a while because there's like a lot of processing going under the hood. And while this generates, let me give some background here. So what we are doing here is that we are actually taking a natural language query, the way you and I communicate, and we are passing it to a really large language model that understands all of this and then also has the context of how things basically it has learned on a lot of text corpus, right? The natural language, the code, everything that is there on the GitHub, Stack Overflow. So it understands how things are structured together. And given a query like this, it is able to put together your response. Yeah, it's taking a while, which is surprising because we tested this out some time back. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So there's a query. It took a little longer. I believe there's like some latency issues and all of those things that we have to solve for. But there you go. You got your query. We can also try out like one more query, I think, like maybe a slightly more complicated version of it. Okay, let's try this one. Generate a query to find the date on which, yeah, you have to be careful with that, on which the stock ticker price of XYZ XYZ was higher than ABC and the sales of XYZ was lesser than ABC. Like pretty convoluted query, right? Like if I have to put it together, I have to like break it down and then think about it. But if I have a bot just soaking this in, absorbing and getting me this query, then it just saves me so much of time and effort. And there is no end to this. You can get creative. I have like a whole bunch of queries, but but in the interest of time, I think we will not be able to run that. But we've had a lot of fun playing around with these queries, and we think it's a really cool feature. Just simplifies the whole experience of running SQL queries.
This is really exciting. Of course, I'm sitting here thinking, is there any way you can tell me what to invest in, not just these, old stock prices, but in the future? All right, thanks so much to both of y'all. And this is going to be from Akshay, and what he's going to be talking about is a Helium DSL kind of starter kit for Hasura. And I'm going to bring him on stage. So you're in the office there.
Yep, that's right.
Yep. Awesome. So a little TLDR, like what is a DSL starter kit?
Sure. All right. So the starter kit is meant to explore two ideas, really. The first one is sort of to spark the imagination on what the nicest way to write an API could be. And over here, we sort of do that through a DSL that helps us do model-driven development, and we'll look at what that looks like in a bit. And the second thing is to put together a starter kit where a developer can go from zero to a complete application as efficiently as possible, with as many inbuilt components as possible, and in as fun a manner as possible. And then later on, if you want to extend your project with other components, you can then just easily swap it out. So these are the two main ideas behind the starter kit. And I have a pre-recorded video that's under 5 minutes. And this project is in active development right now. So let me know what you think.
All right.
Hi there. This is the Helium for Hasura starter kit with a metadata DSL and inbuilt authentication. So let's start with the punchline. Here's a complete classic to-do app written out where a user has many tasks. Specify the database connection, the database migrations, the user model, and the task model, and this actually defines the complete application. The permissions, which includes the predicates and the columns, are specified in code, so we get some interesting code reuse patterns. And we also get some good defaults like the primary key definitions. Now, this gives us an API which I've used to add some seed data. And once the seed data is there, we can actually test it out. Here's a simple query, and here's some tests for permissions. Let's see if we can get the first user and all that user's tasks. And there we have it. Getting started with the Hasura starter kit is really fast and easy. Clone the repository, bring up the Docker services. The app container already has the command line tooling and your application code volume mounted into the container. Create your application schema, the model definitions, and then compile and deploy. Your API is now up and running. Enable the inbuilt JWT-based authentication server by uncommenting a few lines in the Docker Compose file. Create a Postgres schema, which is a namespace for the authentication tables, and import a Hasura metadata module that configures Hasura to work with the authentication schema. You can now configure role-based permissions on your models. Coming back to the to-do app, let's add a feature that allows a task to be shared with another user. So here's a database table. Let's look at the models. The relationships and permissions have been updated. Let's focus on the tasks model. Now we say managing a task is either inserting, updating, or delete permissions on the model. And a task can be managed if it belongs to a particular user. Our task.userid is the signed in user ID. But a task can be seen either if the signed in user can manage it or if it has been shared with the signed in user. And because predicates are defined in code, you can now refactor them, you can compose them. For instance, permissions based on user flags, or you can even do more interesting things like allowing a user who's completed more than 100 tasks to do something different. And the cool thing here is we're not yet thinking about what sort of queries the clients will run against our data, because really there are only so many degrees of freedom, or perhaps affordances that the model provides, which means if you specify a few key things at the right layer, you can then leave generating an expressive API to an engine like Hasura. The DSL actually generates Hasura metadata, which feeds neatly into Hasura's battle-tested code-first workflows to use in integration testing, deploying to multiple environments. I think it's a really fun way to describe the data, and then you get your API for free. Stuff to build next: default scaffolding with data introspection and TypeScript support for additional Hasura features like actions. What should building applications look like? What's the best version of that? Share your thoughts on GitHub issues.
Akshay, thank you so much. So we have some resources by which people can reach out and give some feedback. You just said there was a GitHub issue, correct?
Yes, actually, I'm still working on getting up the docs. I should have that up in
Gotcha.
a few days. Until
All
then,
right.
the resources tab should have a link to the repository, and a fully formatted getting started guide. And yes, we have in fact leveraged several open source projects to put this together.
Exciting. Thank you so much. For our last bit, just some closing comments. As we said a couple of times already, right, HasuraCon is coming up, and there's a lot of exciting things happening. You can find the registration information here. There should be, again, the button down below where this call is happening, and then I believe in our resources over in the chat as well, we have it. So lots of options there. We'll all be there. We're excited to see all of you. So hope to see you before too long at HasuraCon. Speaking of virtual events, we had 2 very successful Data and API days in New York and San Francisco, but we understand that people can't always make it to those locations. So you can see that we have one coming up in partnership with AWS and Yugabyte. That's going to be May 31st, and that's completely virtual. So there's information for signing up there as well. Let's see, some helpful links. Like we always say, we're looking for feedback. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with us. These are the usual sources or routes that we have, so please go for it. And then before I say goodbye, I just want to say one more thing. We've been talking a lot about different things that are coming out or that have just come out. So we've been mentioning the 2.26 release. That'll be available on cloud next week. So a lot of things that we talked about today will be available in that release, along with talking about UDF, so user-defined functions for Snowflake, which is very exciting. And then some general availability for a lot of our data connector-backed databases. So things like MySQL, MariaDB, Oracle, so on and so forth. So look out for that next week, and we'll see you folks at the next one. Thanks so much.